Well, good evening and welcome to Talk of the Stacks. I'm Christy Pearson with Friends of the Hennepin County Library, and I am delighted to see all of you here with us this evening. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, we are thrilled to welcome best-selling novelist Kathryn Stockett, the author of The Help and Calamity Club. But first, on behalf of the library and friends, we would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that in Hennepin County, we live and work on the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. Today, the effects of colonization and oppression are felt locally by Indigenous communities. And by offering this acknowledgement, we commit to recognizing Indigenous nations and to holding ourselves accountable to the work of reconciliation. Thank you. Well, I'd next like to recognize our wonderful sponsors who help make this free series possible. Many thanks to LSC Architects, Nor Companies, and the Minnesota Star Tribune. So let's give them a hand. Well, tonight's event is one of many exciting evenings that we have ahead for you in the year to come. Next up at Talk of the Stacks, we will welcome Ocean Vaughn, best-selling author of The Emperor of Gladness, on July 20th, right here on the Talk of the Stacks stage. Then the 30th season of Pen Pals kicks off at Hopkins Center for the Arts in September, and our lineup includes Lily King, author of Heart the Lover, Megha Majumdar, the author of A Guardian and the Thief, Patrick Ryans, author of Buckeye, Patrick Radden-Keefe, author of Say Nothing, and Tayari Jones, author of Kin. Tickets are now on sale to renewing subscribers and go on sale June 26 for new subscribers. So I hope you can join us at one of these events to come. I invite you to check out our website for more details. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our Hennepin County Library Director, Scott Dimstra. So please join me in giving him a warm welcome to Talk of the Stacks.
Thank you, everyone, for the warm greeting. It's great to be back surrounded by library super fans, library friends, and I love looking out in the third row and seeing my friends from the Plymouth Library as well, too. So my home library, I love it. Well, as you know, spring has sprung and graduation season is upon us. And while schools are wrapping up, the library is soon welcoming in thousands of eager young minds. That's right. Summer learning season in the library is almost here. Last year, 900 programs across our 41 libraries welcomed more than 20,000 youth, discovering new concepts, expanding social and academic skills, and most importantly, having fun making new connections. This year, our library is set to top that record with workshops on Lego building, vibrant Rangoli art, seed bomb factories. And if you're wondering what a seed bomb is, if you Google it, the entry for the library's program will come up and explain what a seed bomb is as well, too. It's super creative. And so much more. But as you're wondering, Scott, it's great about kids. What about us? We do have things for adults as well, too. There's book groups, crafting, workshops, author programs for adults, and more when you fill your summer with community building at your local library. It all starts at your library this June. You can check out more at our website, hclib.org. And now it is my pleasure to introduce this evening's guest. Tonight's moderator, Rob Goudy, is events director for the Friends, where he produces Pen Pals and Talk of the Stacks. His past author interviews include Katie Kitamura, Michelle Zahner, Susan Choi, and Colin McCann. Tonight's special author guest, Kathryn Stockett, is the best-selling author of the worldwide phenomenon, The Help, which was also turned into an Oscar-winning film. Stockett returned to the bookshelves this month with The Calamity Club, a page-turning story set in Depression-era Mississippi. The new book follows a group of unbreakable women fighting to reclaim what's theirs. In the first 2 weeks of its release, The Calamity Club has already become a favorite of readers and critics alike, called a satisfyingly twisty tale, and one of my favorite quotes, a pure hell-raising entertainment. The novel is poised to become everyone's favorite read this summer. Please join me in welcoming the incomparable Kathryn Stockett to Talk of the Stacks.
Wow, thank you so much for coming tonight. This is an amazing group, and I'm just so grateful to finally share with you this book in such a beautiful library. I'm very excited to introduce you to these women that I have spent the last 17 years with. Open up their worlds and their limits and their hope and their fights. And I reckon some of you are wondering, what took you so long? And I'm going to get to the answer to that here at the end. As a writer, it makes sense that I am intrigued by calamity. Calamity is what creates the high stakes for a character, and it's what forces them to evolve. It's always interesting to me to see who fares best in a calamity. You learn who your fighters are and who's resilient and who gets trampled on. And even though it's kind of an old-fashioned word, calamity, I think it's pretty fair to say that these are calamitous times that we're living in today. I assume, like me, a lot of you watched the videos from the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It was just 3 weeks ago, it seems like longer, where a gunman fired shots. And the clip that I kept seeing was of the actress Cheryl Hines from Curb Your Enthusiasm. She's married to Robert F. Kennedy, our Secretary of Health. And when the shots were fired, the Secret Service shielded RFK with their bodies and rushed him to safety, while Cheryl was left sort of hobbling behind him in a black strapless cocktail dress. The journalist Monica Hess wrote what I thought was a very poignant piece in the Washington Post about this. She said, "We are all Cheryl Hines, unprepared for the scenario in which we will be forced to run for our lives, watching the important people be whisked away while we wonder whether we should try to follow them or duck under a table or grab the good wine. This country is exhausting and perverse. We should have worn different shoes." Hess went on to ask, in an event of a mass panic, who gets an escort and who is left to fend for themselves? And it's those that are left to fend for themselves that I've written about in the Calamity Club. I wrote this book with the same intention that I wrote The Help, and that was to ask the question, what happens when you put together a group of scrappy, strong-willed women, all with a rich sense of humor, and all at the very end of their rope in a place as complicated and colorful as Mississippi? It's set in 1933 during the Great Depression, and no one's coming to help these women. No husbands, no fathers, and certainly no government programs. And from this desperation is born a terrible, awful, but what turns out to be a very profitable idea to make money and allows these women to take back control of their lives. The story's told through the eyes of an 11-year-old girl, Meg, who's an orphan in Oxford, Mississippi, and partly because of her own sass, she finds herself unadoptable until she meets a woman named Bertie Calhoun. Bertie is an unmarried woman of 24 who's come to Oxford to ask her sister, who married well, for money, and things are getting harder all over America, and especially in Mississippi. And what I learned about that time And what Bertie discovers herself shocked me. Bertie finds out that as a woman, she could be detained by the police just because someone thinks she looks a little promiscuous that day. She could also be arrested just for flirting with a person of color, and if things went too far, she could be arrested and declared insane, and for that, the state could take her children away and sterilize her so that she couldn't produce more like her. Now, everyone around Bertie seems to think that this is just normal life and how things ought to be, and no woman could or should try to change that. Now, when I get to this point in a story where women are told no, that they can't change a set of unfair rules that they had nothing to do with making, that's when I and my characters start to get very angry. And the more I researched, the more I realized I had so much to learn about this time in our country's history. Now, I will say, first of all, that it wasn't all terrible. I found an account where I asked my grandfather before he passed away what it was like to live back then. And he told me that in the 1930s, the mailman delivered your letters twice a day, and I always loved that. It seemed like such a romantic way to parcel out your time. You'd get your in-town mail in the morning from, your friends down the street, and then you'd get your out-of-town mail in the afternoon from your cousins up in Memphis or down in Biloxi. My granddaddy told me that you didn't have to take out the trash because you didn't have trash, and that milk came from a milk cow in the backyard. And when it went dry, a company would come to your house and change out your cow. He told me that your chickens were hard to eat sometimes. They gave you eggs and they lived with you. Your chickens were your friends. But I knew this kind of nostalgia was far from the tenor of the times. And because I was his granddaughter, he left out how hard things really were. And he'd also left out the parts that Mississippians aren't proud of, which makes me wonder, if I ever have a granddaughter myself, will she ask me what it was like back then? And what will I tell her about right now? And what will I be too ashamed to tell her? The more I researched the 1930s, the more I came to realize that the Calamity Club couldn't just be an entertaining romp, that I had some very hard truths to tell. And while Mississippians are without a doubt the kindest and most generous people that I have ever known, I have to include what H.L. Mencken said about my home state in 1930. He said, Mississippi is without serious rival to the lamentable preeminence of the worst American state. To kick off the 1930s, Mississippi formally declared miscegenation a felony. This included marriage or any sexual relations between whites and those with 1/8 Negro or Asian blood. I learned that according to the Yazoo Herald in Yazoo, Mississippi, childbirth was the second leading cause of death in women after tuberculosis. I learned that birth control was essentially illegal back then, and that condoms were only permitted to be used for disease prevention. So the most popular means of contraception for the American woman was to douche with Lysol disinfectant. Not just in Mississippi, but in most of America, women could not open their own bank account without their husband or father's signature, or open a credit card or secure a loan, regardless of state property laws. And doing this research, I felt like I was exploring an entirely new planet, and it was overwhelming at times. In the book, in part 2, you'll meet a group of entrepreneurial women that, as I said, run a very profitable business for the boys at Ole Miss. And these business women also required a good deal of research on my part. And if you know me, then you know that I'm a little bit OCD and I tend to overthink things. So with the help of an Emory med student, I learned how to set up an old-fashioned test for syphilis and gonorrhea in my kitchen at home. I'm happy to say that I and most of my neighbors at the time did not have it. Some of the rabbit holes, though, I went down ran very deep, and I'm just not the kind of person who gives up easily. After I'd been working on this book for about 7 or 8 years, my friends started saying, maybe it's time to move on, Kitty. After 10 years after the help came out, my publisher fired me. But I didn't want to give up on these women that I'd spent so much time with. And if I was going to write about this time in history, I intended to get the facts right. 1933 was a very different time, and even the dialogue that people used was different. So under a growing mountain of data, I finally gave in and asked my mother, would she help me research some of the words that folks used at this time, and what I needed help with were the words for female anatomy. Now, if you knew my mom, you'd know she has this very high Southern voice and this big hair, and she's real sweet. But do you know that she compiled 1,362 different names for women's lady parts, some of which I will share with you? Fun tunnel, money box, snake charmer, the Oval Office, organ grinder, salami garage, fortune nookie, and the Twatlantic Ocean. My mother is 85 years old. I had no idea she was such a good researcher. Which is all to say, I got a little bogged down, but I finally finished the book, and I thank you so much for your patience.
Kathryn,
Rob,
may I call you Kitty?
please call me Kitty.
I think after that I should. Kitty, welcome to the Minneapolis Central Library. Welcome to Talk of the Stacks. We couldn't be more delighted to have you here.
Me too.
Welcome to everyone in the crowd. Thank you for being here. And to get started, I actually want to ask them a question. Could you raise your hands in this in-person crowd and let me know how many of you have finished the Calamity Club? Okay.
That's more than I've seen.
Congratulations. Well done. I think that's probably about 25%. So thank you for doing such a great job setting up the story for us. But the first place I want to go is I want to hear more about your two narrators. Much like in The Help, where we hear the perspectives of several narrators telling the story, in this one, your narrators are Bertie Calhoun and Meg LaFleur. Can you tell us more about those narrators and how you decided they would tell us the story?
So the story opens with Bertie Calhoun. She's 24 years old, and she's already considered a spinster. She lives at home with her mom and her grandmother, and like I said, she's gone to ask her sister for money, but in the first few pages of the book, you meet her in the drugstore buying condoms, which, that doesn't sound like very much because, not that I really want to go buy condoms, but back then, it was like just a few years before this, you had to have a doctor's prescription to purchase condoms. And then you had to be married. And Bertie's known for, kind of taking the safe route in life. So this is kind of a tricky day for her. Just down the road from this is Meg. She's 11 years old, and she is an orphan in Oxford, Mississippi. And she's unadoptable because nobody wants to adopt the big girls. They only want to adopt the babies. And the woman that runs the orphanage, Miss Garnett, she treats Meg terribly and tells her she's dirty. This is a really tough time for Meg as well. And then she meets Bertie Calhoun, and their stories intertwine.
And we learn to fall in love with them both because they're so dearly written. Could you do me a favor? Could you maybe read us a passage of Meg?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this is the first Meg section, and just inside the door of the orphanage is a sign on the wall that Meg likes to stare at and kind of wonder over. Welcome to the Lafayette County Orphan Asylum for Girls, founded 1927. We do not accept coloreds, Indians, Jews, Mexicans, Oriental types, twins, anyone who has or has had leprosy, consumption, missing limbs, or hair lip, no boys, no sick children, or anyone of a retarded nature, no girls over the age of 12, no women in the family way. May the Lord bless you all. When I was first brought here to the orphanage, I used to put on a pretend play in my head. In it, my mama would walk in and say, "Meg, I have returned. I am here to take you home." I would have her dressed in the yellow outfit she left me in with the red rickrack on the collar, or a snappy slim blue number cut on the bias, her good ruby hair comb fixed to her hair. When I got her dressed up the way I liked with all the things matched perfect, she would lean down and say, "I am so sorry I left you, Meg." Now, at this part of the story, I know most of these girls here would run right into their mama's arms, say all is forgiven, hug her neck, let's go home. But not in my play. When my mama says this, I like to yell at her a little first. "Well, well," I like to say, "you sure look like you've been eating good." And I might add, "I guess there's plenty for you now that you do not have a little girl to look after." And then I would tell her how it sure got cold when you were gone, and how I burned everything that lit. And she was a #1 giant shit pile for a mama, and I had a mind to find myself a new one. Around this time was when her begging and pleading would start. She would begin offering me things like a sack of hard candy, or new patent leather shoes, an encyclopedia set with no letters missing. Oh, I went wild with the goods, and when it cost high enough, I would sigh and say, "Fine, I accept your offer." Then I'd flip that big phony Miss Garnett the finger, and me and my mama would walk out the door.
Meg LaFleur, everyone. These characters are just so lovable, and we love to get to know them throughout the 630 pages of your book. I do want to ask you about living through the phenomenon that was The Help, writing it, promoting it, and then doing the same when it was turned into a movie. How did that experience inform your approach to writing the new book? What did you learn that you applied to the Calamity Club?
Well, when I was writing The Help, I was living in New York City, and it was right after 9/11, and they cut our phones off. I lived downtown, and they barricaded us into our neighborhood, so I couldn't call my family and just tell them we were okay, and I couldn't really call anybody and have them reassure me. My husband at the time had been downtown when the buildings went down. And so I got really homesick, and so I started writing in the voices from my childhood, and I kept writing, and I didn't really think anybody was going to read it, and I had 60 rejection letters after 5 years to back that idea up. But when I sat down to write the Calamity Club, it wasn't just me alone in a room writing out of homesickness. Now it was me in a room with all those readers and critics staring back at me. And I gotta say, it was paralyzing at times, but it really didn't serve me well that I was determined to write a really short book and a really simple story that didn't raise the kind of criticisms that The Help did. And after 5 or 6 years of trying to write that kind of story that I wasn't satisfied with, I finally just gave in to the fact that it's impossible to write about Mississippi, especially in the 1930s, and not write about discrimination and hypocrisy and the absurdities that went on at that time.
And we'll get to that in a little bit, but I want to pick up on another thing that you said about finding the voices of your childhood. Oxford and the Mississippi Delta play such a pivotal role in this book, and they're almost another character for you. How did you infuse your knowledge of the place into the book, and what is your Mississippi?
Ooh, that's a complicated one. I have a complex relationship with Mississippi. I love it. It's where I go to fill my cup as a writer. Something about just being in the humidity, and it's so beautiful and so green, and the people are so hospitable and just, I don't know, generous, and the accents, and there's so many rich storytellers that I grew up around, and writers from Mississippi. Eudora Welty's one of my favorite writers. Donna Tartt. I mean, the list is so long. So I love to go back home where I live, just right outside the Mississippi River area, and like I said, fill my cup and write, and then I get pissed off. There'd be something in the news or something I see or hear in Mississippi, and I go back to New York. And I'll write in New York for a while, and then New York will piss me off. And I go back to Mississippi, and, it's back and forth.
So you mentioned Donna Tartt, which makes me have to ask, so Bertie's sister Frances marries into the Tartt family. Was that name taken from Donna Tartt?
It was, and originally this book was called The Tartt Club, but my publisher said that was a little too on the nose.
I have another question about place. So in the Tartt family in Oxford, the family home is called Idlewild, and it's the family estate that eventually becomes the Calamity Club. Was it based on any place in particular?
Not really. It was just where I live. Oh man, I don't know how I got so lucky, but I live out in the country in Mississippi, and in this area that had sort of been abandoned for years, and I live next door. I bought a house, and Tate Taylor, who wrote the screenplay for The Help and directed it, he lives next door, and one of the actresses from The Help lives next door to him, and a choreographer lives next door to me, and the casting director lives across the street, and the producer lives down the road. We all bought these houses intentionally so that we could all be together and just be weirdo artists in this one community. And I forgot what your question was, but I just love that we all, we call it our found family. I love my family, but they really do irritate me. So I consider, these are my people. And they all have second careers in Los Angeles and New York, and I do too. So it's pretty fun when we're all in town.
I think we'd all love to come to a neighborhood barbecue.
Come on, anytime.
We'd love to. This book, much like The Help, captures such a pivotal historical moment in such beautiful detail. The Help was the Civil Rights era. This is the Great Depression and the Calamity Club. It's so rich in historical detail. I think it's Bertie at one point picks up a Sears Roebuck catalog and burns it because she doesn't have any logs left. And I just want to know more about what the research process was like, and how do you make his history feel lived in and true and present instead of just being like this telegraphing of historical details?
I mean, my grandfather was such a good storyteller, and all those Sears and Roebuck catalogs I have sitting still in my office came from him. So I guess I looked at so many photographs that Eudora Welty had taken, and then I went to Oxford, and I didn't go there a lot. I've obviously been there plenty of times, but I didn't want to think of it like it is now. It's a bustling town. It's just darling. But I wanted to think of it like I was seeing in the photographs. But I was able to talk to a couple of people that remember the 1930s and 40s, and I got their accounts, and I studied so many maps, but I already knew that I wanted to base my story in Oxford, but I chose 1933 because for most people, the Great Depression started, with the crash in 1929, but for Mississippians and a lot of the surrounding states, it really started a few years before that. In 1927, there was a horrific flood of the Mississippi River that displaced 700,000 people. In the rural areas, that is a lot of people. And in some places, the floodwaters stayed high for 6 months. So Mississippi was already very much on the decline, but Oxford was the rare exception for that, because in 1930, the University of Ole Miss, which is based in Oxford, Ole Miss we call it, in 1930 they had lost their college accreditation, and so in 1933, when the story opens, they got it back. And so this is one of the rare towns in Mississippi that's actually on the rebound, because that fall 1,000 students were coming in on the train to check in to the University of Mississippi. But I also chose 1933 because I didn't want penicillin to be widely used, so that if you were in a certain profession and you picked something up, it was life-threatening. You could easily lose your life if you picked up syphilis, which had been brought home after World War I. And then also, I chose 1933 because it was the last year of Prohibition. And so if you happen to have a cellar with 22 cases of Kentucky bonded bourbon, not only were you sitting on contraband, you were also sitting on something very valuable in a college town.
And those college boys do become the lucky recipients of the bourbon eventually down the line in the book. You did mention some of the colorful characters that join the story midway. After crisis hits the Tart family, this is Bertie's sister Frances's family that she married into, they're forced to take in this very unique cast of boarders with names like Flossie, Ruby, the twins Trixie and Dixie, and the beautiful Esmeralda. And their slang in particular is quite colorful. So when
thanks to my mom.
Thanks to your mama. When they decide to start a dance club on the property, this is how Flossie explains the rules. Every key has got to have a clock so the wallets can see for themselves we ain't skimming time. And don't forget, we could sure use a premier girl in this club. A Sheba so hot you could fry an egg on her face. How fun was it researching slang in this era and adding it into the text?
It's really fun hearing you read that part.
Before the talk, we were talking about what accent I should use, and
Yeah.
I decided a New Yorker kind would work.
There you go. Flossie's from a lot of different places. And it's funny, sometimes this is my 14th city in a row. So I've been asked, I feel like, every question. But sometimes people ask me, who's your favorite character? Do you identify with? And I always say Flossie. She's a prostitute. And she's so vulnerable. And she's just honest, and she's the kind of person that moves house to house in life, kind of looking for some place where she feels like family. And as I described where I live in Mississippi, I think that's something that a lot of us kind of go through at some point in our lives.
Yeah, and that's such a wonderful thing that you do for all of the border characters, is that, they come on so strongly with a sense of humor, but then you do discover that all of them have a backstory, that, some of them may have children that we didn't know about until, the last quarter of the book. It's not a huge spoiler, I promise. So thank you for lending that humanity so much to your characters, but they also happen to be laugh out loud funny. So I want to know, how hard is it to write humor, and does it come to you naturally? And do you structure your jokes to build to a punchline like a comedy writer, or is it all instinct?
Well, when you write a book for 17 years, you got to keep yourself entertained. But, life is funny. I don't know how anybody gets through the darkest moments of their life without kind of looking eventually for that spark of humor. And especially for me, a mother, a writer, and coming from a place as beautiful but as absurd sometimes as Mississippi. But what I like to do to bring out the humor in a story is I like to ask myself, what is the worst possible thing I can do to a character to torture them? And, in The Help, it was Hilly Holbrook with the pie. And for those of you that haven't read the Calamity Club, you'll find out in part 2, if you get that far, what it is. But I find that so often I just let these characters do the talking, and I just write it down and I just listen to what they have to say. And so often what they come up with is pretty funny.
So what you're saying is that we're just very lucky that you happen to be a really funny person.
I don't know. I just don't even feel like I can take credit for that, because I know it sounds crazy when I say that I hear voices, but I really do. I hear them in my head, and they're gonna find their way out.
And we are so lucky that they do, because these characters in this book are so riveting and so well drawn, and from so many different types of backgrounds. So you've really nailed it on the head in terms of writing unique, individualized characters. I want to move a little bit on towards the themes and ideas that you explore in the book. And I want to bring up something that the New York Times said in their otherwise glowing review. They said, and I quote, "This is not a so-called novel of ideas." And I hate to say this, but I have to respectfully disagree with the New York Times, because not only do you cover gender equality, pay parity, the fight for women's access to adequate health care, eugenics and sterilization, and then the horrors of gay conversion therapy even. All of these concepts that you're exploring are all the more pressing because so many of these fights continue today. Were you cognizant of trying to find issues that would ring true with today's audiences?
I don't get real political in these talks. You can agree with me or you can disagree, and that's okay. But in my opinion, women are losing their health rights. I'm not saying that we're going back to where we were in 1933, but I think the car is headed in the wrong direction. And as people read this book and they think about what women went through back then, the mistreatment of women, the belittling of women, especially in the medical field, I guess I just want people to take it seriously that history can repeat itself and we can't take women's rights for granted.
In particular, one of the characters that I loved meeting later in the book was the young medical student, Virginia. Can you tell us more about how you discovered her and filled her out as a character?
Yeah, so Virginia Cunningham she got her medical certificate after 4 years at Ole Miss, and now she's going through the very daunting journey of trying to find a med school that will accept a woman. She's based in the South, but she's determined not to go to med school in the South. She wants to go up north where, their medicine is based on science, not on religion. And she has a lot of doors slammed in her face. And she's also looking, she has this determination to treat women across all walks of life, not just the women, that are affluent and going to the hospital to have babies, but also, the women that might, maybe their husbands came home from the war and brought home something, or maybe women that are in a certain profession and picked something up along the way. And she just has this very global kindness about her that I really enjoyed writing her. Thank you for asking about her. No one's ever asked me.
I stopped dead in my tracks when she was introduced in the book. I found her so inspiring, and I think all of you in the crowd are going to fall in love with her too, as well as many of the characters in the book. Perhaps the strongest link between The Help and the Calamity Club is how brave these characters are. Do you add these common acts of bravery to your stories intentionally, or did the story simply move that way? And what role has bravery played in your own life?
Well, let me just first say that I like to write and form a narrator that can showcase the absurdities of these so-called rules we're supposed to be following in gender roles, in religion, in race, the contradictions of the Jim Crow laws. So I think what comes along with that in this kind of building out a character that can, really seek out those kinds of just inequalities, they've got to be brave to get through the world. So when Bertie Calhoun, the 24-year-old, shows up for the first time at the orphanage, she sees a sign over the door outside that says, "All God's children are welcome here." And then she walks in and sees that sign. And I have this friend in Mississippi. Her name's Vicki Love, and she is a firecracker. But sometimes she'll just call me, and without even saying hello, she'll just say, "What is wrong with people?" And I like a character that just goes through life just like Vicki Love.
I want to turn the page a little bit to another theme or idea that you explore. And I think it's one of the most poignant ones in the book, is the desperation that occurs when you need money, and particularly when the women in this book need money. In many ways, access to wealth for them means access to personal freedom, and it affects them all. It affects Bertie, her sister Frances, Frances's mother-in-law, Mrs. Tart, Charlie LaFleur, Lucille, the maids Picador and Polly. And if you don't know who these characters are, that's fine. You're going to love them. Can you comment on the importance of wealth for success in America and to these characters in their specific time? And is there a personal tie to this need for wealth to succeed for you?
Well, I mean, being poor is the great leveler. Everybody's in the same boat. When everybody has nothing, and we talk about today, like, so, and if somebody is poor, we say that person's really poor. But the truth is, it's being poor today is nothing like being poor back then. And one of the things that I learned when I was researching was that there was a single day in 1932 in Mississippi where 1/4 of the property in the state, 40,000 homeowners lost their homes in one day because they couldn't pay their taxes. And I went back and looked at the newspaper at some of those foreclosure listings, and some of them lost their homes for 55 cents. Most of them were less than $1. So, I mean, I don't think I really live in the present. I think I live in the past. I don't know. I guess it's just has something to do with being a writer. So I don't have no idea. Is money important today? Probably.
Well, we just heard that Starbucks is going to charge us $9 for a cup of coffee now. So, so I think money is equally being challenged at the moment, perhaps.
Yeah.
I do also want to ask you a little bit about literature, because throughout this entire book, I mean, you've already mentioned Eudora Welty and Donna Tartt and others, but throughout this book, there are so many wonderful pieces of great literature mentioned. Call of the Wild, Faulkner's As I Lay Dying, many of F. Scott Fitzgerald's books. And then the orphan Meg LaFleur at one point is both reading Huckleberry Finn, but also seems to, in a way, be Huckleberry Finn. And her street smart, funny, brave, and wise beyond her years' way. Which classical writers have influenced you the most?
Oh, I mean, Mark Twain, by far. I mean, he taught me how to write in the vernacular. He taught me how to spell it like it sounds. You just spell it like that on the page. Eudora Welty did the same thing in Why I Live at the P.O. I mean, it's just such a great short story. Donna Tartt, Donna Tartt, she was the first writer. She's from Mississippi, and her first book, right out of college, was The Secret History. And when I was just graduating college and someone handed me that book, I saw that not only was she a woman, she was from Mississippi, and she was right around my age, was able to do this. It sort of gave me permission as a writer, and it gave me hope that I could actually, if she can do it, I could do maybe not as good as her, but, pretty good.
Well, and now that you mentioned that, we really do see the link between you two, writing on this epic scale and traveling all around the region that you're going through and discovering all these many various characters that are humorous and bold and brash. So I think you can accept yourself as the progeny of Donna Tartt, if you would so say so.
One day.
Well, it's almost time for the audience to ask some questions, but I do have to ask one final question. And The Help, the movie, was such a huge success. Is there any interest yet in turning the Calamity Club into a movie or a TV show, perhaps with your friend who lives down the street, Tate Taylor?
I think he'd like to know the answer to that, too. I don't know. I really seriously just finished writing this in February. So when I get home tomorrow, I'm going to check my email and see if there have been any offers.
Well, if we're lucky, there are, and if we're extra lucky, you'll be on the writing team.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now it is time for your questions. If we could please bring up the lights. My friend and colleague from Valley Bookseller, Pamela Klingerhorn, is in the audience with a roving microphone. So if you have questions, please raise your hand, and Pamela will come to you.
We have our first question right here in the fourth row.
Hello, thank you so much for being here. I love your characters and your ability to tell stories. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, it sounds like you had 60 rejections, that process, like how you dealt with that, and if you ended up with an agent or how you did get it into a book. My mom wrote a wonderful book and we're trying to get it out. It's about a lot of the history of Minneapolis, and with some, her grandmother ran a boarding house in Kenwood.
Oh,
And so
really?
it's-
Yeah. Yeah, 60 rejections. It was, there are no expectations when you're writing your first novel. So you just keep on swinging, and maybe you'll hit the ball. But I did eventually, number 60 was the agent that finally, I tricked her into saying yes for the help. But after I got fired, after 10 years, I still hadn't turned in this second book, and I got fired. I kind of cut ties with my agent. I figured, well, if I don't have a publisher, I don't need an agent either. And then, I was kind of circling the drain, just really, really upset about that. I was directionless. I didn't know what to do. And a really good friend of mine, knew, and she was watching me, and it was during COVID, and she was watching me just get really sad and depressed because I didn't know what to do next. I was sitting on most of a book with no publisher, and she, behind my back, my friend Sarah, called Julie Grau, who is my publisher now, and she said, "Julie, this is Sarah. I've got this friend, and she has written this book. And if you're a publisher, you're just like, oh shit, here we go." But somehow Julie, I don't know, agreed to read it, and she called me the next week and said, "Hey, let's work together." And she hadn't even started her company yet. She has just a boutique. I say this amazing small publishing house that publishes, I don't know, 12 books a year. And just like to have that kind of attention, and she's just a genius, and to be working with an editor like that, I feel so lucky. So good luck, and I'll give you the advice that Dorothy Allison gave me when I was trying to write a book. She said, it's okay to F up.
The next question is up here in the back of the theater.
Thank you. Were you surprised or caught off guard by the enormity of the success of The Help?
Oh, no one was more surprised than me. I didn't think anybody was going to read it, really. I think my family was pretty shocked, too. So, yeah, it's, you don't, if you're a serious writer, you don't write because you think that you're going to really sell books. You write to give voice to those crazy people in your head, and they're going to find their way out. Yeah, and you're either going to write them down or you're going to go to an institution.
The next question's here in the center.
Thank you. Yeah, just finished the book. Loved it. Loved the characters. The nurse resonated with me. Mrs. Tart, the mom, I thought she had a lovely character. And that scene when I won't say it, but at the end of the book, I love it when a writer doesn't maybe tell you everything. They make you figure things out. And the culmination of what you're waiting for, and then you get to the end, and it ended pretty abruptly. And it made me hungry for what was happening. And did you have any thoughts on taking that further, or did you end it on purpose that way?
Like a sequel?
That could work, yeah.
No.
The Tart Club, yeah. So.
No, I think after 650 pages, you need to tie it up. Thank you for your question.
There's another question up in the back.
I wanted to ask, you mentioned a little bit about the criticisms and that of the help, and I believe you learn as much from criticism as you do from praise. So what did you learn from the criticisms that the help did receive?
You know, it was so long ago I don't remember, but I will say this. This is something that I think I knew when I was writing the help, and I'm reminded of it daily, I feel like. And that is to be an empathetic human being, we have got to imagine what it feels like to stand in another person's shoes. And that doesn't mean that we have to feel sorry for them, and it doesn't mean that it has to always be the people that are down on their luck. I mean, I wish they taught this in schools. I think it's so important to imagine what it feels like to be a successful person, just as much as it feels like to be a person that's having a really hard time. And that lesson, I think, is what makes us an empathetic just person. And that's, even after all the criticism of the help, that's just something I'll never forget, that conversations were had. I was told over and over again, people had conversations that they would not have had otherwise. Thank you.
Is there another question? Right in the front.
I'm curious, do you have a particular method to your writing? Like, for example, some authors say I have to write 2 pages a day, that's what I have to do, or I have to sit at my desk with a cup of coffee and type it up on a typewriter. I'm just curious what method you use, or if there's...
I think if I was the kind of person that had a plan, this book would have been written a lot sooner. But on the next one, I'm going to do that. Thank you.
We have time for just 1 or 2 more questions. We do have one down here in front. But before we do, just a few announcements. The evening does not end here. After the talk, Kitty is going to participate in a meet and greet, which will be a photo opportunity to say hello and get your picture taken with her. So if you're interested in being a part of that, as you head out of the auditorium, just cross to the other side of the bridge. Just in the interest of time, Kitty will not be able to personalize or sign books during the meet and greet. However, Valley Bookseller has every single copy at that table is signed. So if you want a signed copy of that book, stop by the Valley Bookseller table. And I think there's even a few signed copies of The Help. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Everything's signed. And then I have an even more fun announcement. If you parked in this building tonight, guess what? Your parking is free. It's a special one-night only gift from the library to you. So I know you pulled a ticket on the way in. You do not need to do anything with that ticket. The gate will be up as you exit. So just head straight to the gate. I always feel like Oprah when I get to say that. You get a parking spot, and you get a parking spot, and you get a parking spot. And right down in front here.
Tell me about the male people in your book. Like Tom Jr. was sort of a, not very successful.
Yeah, the question is
Meg's,
about the
Meg's
men.
father,
Uh-huh.
Bertie's boyfriend.
I don't have a problem with men, but they will never fare very well in any of my books. Thank you.
There's another
think
question in
we're
the front
good.
row.
Okay.
I know all of your characters live in your head, but what was your experience to seeing them live on the screen?
Oh, for the help about the movie. Well, when I finished writing the help and we were starting to get a couple of offers from Hollywood, my friend Tate, who I went to high school with, he was living in LA at the time. He asked me for the rights, and I said no, because he had made one feature film that made it grossed $7,500 in the box office. But then he eventually talked me into it because he told me he knew how to get to me. He said, "Listen, if you give this story to some kind of Hollywood type and somebody who doesn't understand the South writes this screenplay or directs it, it's gonna turn out just really sucky, or they're gonna give up trying." And as I explained, I don't like to give up on things. So when he said that, that's when I knew that that Tate should be the one to make this movie. It was also really lucky for me that at the time he lived with Octavia Spencer. And so I had met Octavia several times through him. We weren't close friends, but I just had watched the way she moves her body and talks, and she's so funny, and her intonations. And so I just put it in the contract that Octavia has to play Minnie. And he, of course, rolled his eyes and was like, of course, And they stayed living with each other. They were roommates for several years after The Help came out, too. Yeah, thank you.
Well, Kitty, we're so lucky that you don't give up. We're so lucky that Bertie Calhoun doesn't give up, that Meg LaFleur doesn't give up, that all of these characters don't give up. So thank you for being here tonight. Before you leave, Kitty has a special request. Could we get a photo of all of you? Would you be willing to hold up your books and show us your copies of the Calamity Club, and Kitty can get in a photo?
Really? Oh, gosh, this is so cool.
So hold those books high. We want to see them. Rick, should we go down on the floor? Okay.